It's time for 515 Fantasy Football.
I know football. Are you ready for some football?
Domination on Sundays begins with listening to these guys on Thursdays.
You ready for this?
Over 40 years of fantasy football experience between them.
Yeah!
One is a proud veteran of the United States Marine Corps, husband and father, entering his 19th year of fantasy competition. Brian Eikenberry. The other, also a proud husband and father, is one of the winningest fantasy minds in the state. Celebrating 25 years of excellence, Andy Hall.
Let's get the game on!
It's showtime. The 515 Fantasy Football Show with your hosts, Andy Hall and Brian Eikenberry.
Welcome, one and all, to a Week 8 edition of the show. I'm Andy Hall. Couple quick housekeeping items right off the top. First, until further notice and going forward, this is going to be a one-man operation. Sadly, Brian has had to make the decision to step aside, at least for the time being. This is not a conclusion he came to without serious consideration and certainly wasn't reflective of the great friendship between the two of us. What I will tell you is that Brian's doing just fine. This wasn't something he wanted, but at this time found it absolutely necessary. And I understand and respect his decision and look forward to kicking his ass when the two of our teams meet in fantasy competition. So, with no Brian, that does change the format of the show a bit. The in-depth analysis, fantastic forecasting you've come to know and love about the show won't change a bit. But I will be doing it in a more condensed fashion without someone to argue with. And if I'm arguing with myself, that's weird, right? Yeah, I thought so. If you want to argue, invite you to like us on Facebook, on Twitter, at 515fantasy, at Andy Hall Radio. Happy, as always, to have the two-way conversation. This will be a one-hour show going forward. No pop quiz segment, no flea flicker. Headlines will largely be handled within each matchup breakdown. Everything else will be the same, except it'll be all me. Lucky you. Over the course of this hour, all the matchups, grades, and all the fantasy-relevant players as per usual. Bargain Bin segment sponsored by Twisted Vine Brewery later on, giving you some sneaky good dart throws that are likely still on your waiver wire. And a recap of what went down in Week 7 of the Listener League as well. That's presented by my friends at Iowa Firecracken. Let's dive right into the matchups, and we begin with Thursday night's matchup. Tonight, you'll see Miami at Baltimore, a tantalizing Thursday night matchup if you're a corpse. Miami at Baltimore. We'll start with the Dolphins. Quarterback Matt Moore facing a Ravens defense surrendering the 7th fewest passing yards per game, only 189, and one of only 5 teams that have more interceptions than touchdowns allowed through the air. He's on the bench. His passing game, Jarvis Landry, a C+, decent in a flex spot, especially in PPR leagues. Julius Thomas, an excellent matchup here. The Ravens have allowed the second most tight end touchdowns with 6. He's on the radar with a B-. We'll have to keep an eye on Devontae Parker. If he goes, he's a C grade. He has scored in both his head-to-head matchups against the Ravens. And Kenny Stills, if Parker is out, gets the C. Jay Ajayi, once again, a very favorable spot here. He gets an A grade. Baltimore is the first team to have allowed over 1,000 yards rushing on the season, over 145 a game on the ground. A huge workload coming for Ajayi. Make sure he's in your starting lineup. As far as the Ravens, remember when Joe Flacco used to go 36 for 47 for 381 yards and 4 touchdowns? It wasn't that long ago. December of last year, to be exact, against these Dolphins in Baltimore. Flacco circa 2017 more closely resembles my grandma back there. He's on the bench. So are his pass catchers, with the exception of Jeremy Maclin. If he plays, I'll give him a desperation C because, somebody's got to catch passes, right? The running game, it's all about Buck Allen for me, but only a C+. The Dolphins are allowing less than 4 yards per carry, only 4 touchdowns to opposing backs through 6 games, but he did touch the ball 29 times for 170 combo yards and a score the last time he played Miami, so you have to consider him in your flex spot at the very least. On to Minnesota at Cleveland, the Sunday morning London game. We'll begin with the Vikings here. Got to make a strong case for Keenum this week, facing a Browns secondary that has allowed the second most passing scores on the season with 14. They've only collected 4 INTs, and Keenum has done a very good job in Bradford's absence of taking care of the ball. Talk more about him later on in the show. Receivers, Stephon Diggs dealing with the groin injury that has cost him the better part of 3 games. If he can go this weekend, he's a very solid start, a B+. Want to make sure he's in your lineup. Adam Thielen is in play regardless of Diggs' status, a B if Diggs goes, an A grade if he doesn't. Adam Thielen this week. Huge target volume potential in a matchup like this. Kyle Rudolph disappointed a bit in a great matchup last week versus Baltimore. Here he gets a team darn near as bad, so he's got to be in consideration. I give Rudy a B grade. The running game, it appears as if Latavius Murray is the guy to go to when we feel as though it'll be a positive game script for the Vikings, and this is certainly one of those, so he's a B grade. Cleveland are a top 10 run-stopping unit, holding opposing runners to only 3 yards per carry. Murray's the main touchdown threat out of the backfield, but McKinnon will get his touches as well and is more valuable from a PPR standpoint. Sort of a B-, C+ type of start for Jerick McKinnon here. The Browns, this is easy. Literally benching everybody. This will likely not be pretty, keeping with the theme we've seen all year from this team. Duke Johnson is the only name worth mentioning here, and I suppose if you're in a PPR league and hurt by injuries or bye weeks, you could plug him in as a flex, but I don't expect him to do a ton this week. I just don't. Atlanta at the New York Jets for the Falcons. Got to like Matt Ryan in this spot. The Jets ranked 23rd in passing yards allowed, have given up the most passing scores on the season with 15. Ryan's an easy A. His pass catchers, I like everyone, including Julio Jones, who gets an A. Mohamed Sanu is in play as a B grade. Taylor Gabriel, the dart throw, C, only because he's not on the field nearly as much. Even tight end Austin Hooper should be considered here. The Jets have given up 5 scores to the tight end position this season. Hooper is a B-. The Devontae Freeman-Tevin Coleman split. Freeman gets the majority of the work, especially early, plus goal line, so he's an A grade. The Jets have allowed the 5th most rushing yards in the league, a total of 5 scores to opposing backs. Coleman, a C+. He may get more field time if this one's a blowout, and it certainly could be, judging by the facts and figures I'm looking at. On the Jets side, Atlanta, they're a top 10 pass defense, so Josh McCown only a C grade, likely gets behind and has to throw a lot. You're hoping for garbage time production from him. Jermaine Kearse, Robbie Anderson, Jeremy Curley, a total roll of the dice as to who will come out of this a fantasy winner. It's easier to avoid them completely if you can. I guess if you had a gun to my head and said, pick one, I'd probably say Jermaine Kearse. Tight end Austin Seferian Jenkins should probably be on your bench this week. The Falcons have yet to allow a tight end touchdown and did a decent job keeping Gronk out of the end zone last week. ASJ is a C grade for me. Use them only if you have to. Running game, also not an easy matchup for these guys. Bilal Powell is your C grade. Only guy I'm giving a starting grade to. Neither Matt Forte nor Elijah McGuire should be in your starting lineup this week. One final matchup for this segment, Carolina at Tampa Bay. First matchup of the season between these two NFC South teams. Begin with the Panthers and Cam Newton, who hasn't fared well on the road against these Bucs the last 2 times he's faced them. But considering how bad Tampa has looked on the defensive side of the ball this year, you can't ignore him. Cam's going to get it done this week through the air and with his legs. He's a B+. Calvin Benjamin and Devin Funchess both getting B grades here. Benjamin more the targets, receptions, yards guy. Funchess, of course, the touchdown threat. I think both can help you out this week, despite the goose egg in Chicago in Week 7. Man, was that ugly. Jonathan Stewart, still alive, still completely ineffective, but they don't really have another early down type of runner here. It looks like they don't want Christian McCaffrey to be that guy, so J. Stu is a C+. CMC is a B- in PPR formats, a C grade otherwise if you're in standard. Not a whole lot to love about Christian McCaffrey in this particular matchup. All right, over to the Bucs. Carolina doesn't give up a lot of yardage through the air, only 181 per game, but they've allowed 10 passing scores while intercepting only 1 enemy pass. Jameis Winston, a decent start here. I'll give him a B grade, though I think it's a pretty hard ceiling. Mike Evans gets an A grade despite what looks to be a tough matchup. Not as though you're considering benching him anyway, right? Deshaun Jackson, only a C+. Got that home run ability that works in a flex in standard leagues. And I think Cameron Brate is still the tight end I'd prefer to trot out there, despite O.J. Howard flashing for 2 scores last week. Brate is a B- grade this week. The Panthers have given up 4 tight end scores on the year. Howard gets very limited opportunities, a C grade at best. You'll find him in blocking more often than not. As far as the running game goes, Doug Martin, the only running back of note here, should continue to see good volume in the 20 to 25 touch range. Giving him a B grade, the Panthers are holding opposing backs to under 4 yards per carry and have allowed 3 rushing scores on the season. That is it. We have lots more matchups still to get to. Again, the promise, we'll give you the bargain bin picks near the end of the show and talk Listener League as well. Again, if you want to, you can like us on Facebook. Haven't done that yet. Get her done. Facebook.com/515fantasy. We're also on Twitter at 515fantasy. I'm at Andy Hall Radio. Awful lot of action week in and week out as to who you should start, who you should sit, trade opportunities, waiver wire. I can answer all your questions there and always happy to have the two-way conversation. Even if you want to argue with me, totally cool with that. I'm okay with it. Some guys, maybe don't like that so much. And, we see a lot of you folks getting ignored. And I've never been a fan of that. Going back to before I was hosting my own show, trying to reach out to people I considered experts and wanted an opinion from, and getting completely ignored, it sucks, right? Well, we don't do that to you here. You know that. So, stick around. You are listening to the one, the only 515 Fantasy Football Show. You're hearing us on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. You are listening to the 515 Fantasy Football Show, heard each and every Thursday on 1350 AM ESPN Radio and 102.1 FM here in Des Moines, Iowa. We're also available digitally on iTunes/Apple Podcasts. Still not used to saying that yet. I wish we could just stick with iTunes for a little while. You know what I mean? We're also available on Stitcher for those of you with Android phones listening in from all over the world. We really appreciate it. Actually, I should say because if you missed it earlier, unfortunate news that Brian, my longtime friend and co-host, decided to step aside for the rest of this season and perhaps longer. Very unfortunate. We're going to miss him as a member of this show. Brian and I are still friends, but he had some other commitments. So I am flying solo and invite you to like us on Facebook, 515 Fantasy Football. We're on Twitter at 515 Fantasy, a great spot in case you're looking for some help. Going into the Week 8 games and beyond, we've had, hundreds and hundreds of you reaching out to me on a week-to-week basis for advice on your lineup, waiver wire, trade advice, kind of a one-stop shop there at 515 Fantasy. I'm at Andy Hall Radio in case you want to follow me there. I do answer fantasy stuff, of course, but that's more for my rock radio side. So if you want to talk rock, heavy metal, whatever you like, I'm into lots of different kinds of music, so invite you to check me out there. No doubt about it. We are back into the Week 8 matchups here, just barreling through as best we can. San Francisco at Philadelphia. We'll start with the Niners. I like C.J. Beathard, but definitely not in this matchup. C grade at best, despite what appears to be a positive matchup on paper. Beathard is young, largely unproven. I like some of the things I've seen him do. And, I've been watching C.J. Beathard. For those of you outside of the state of Iowa, didn't get a whole lot of chance to see C.J. Beathard back in college. University of Iowa, he was a Hawkeye, so being here in the Hawkeye State, I had plenty of chances to watch C.J. Beathard play during college time, and this kid's special. There's just something about him that I really, really like, but some of these matchups, man, just give me it's kind of a woozy feeling. Just not feeling great about this one. Philadelphia is a team known to get after the quarterback. Rattle a young guy like C.J. Beathard. This is a great spot for him to prove himself, but I just can't see starting him in a fantasy league unless, of course, it's like a 2-quarterback super flex type of situation. Pierre Garçon is a B-plus grade, though, against an Eagles secondary. Ranks 30th in yards allowed, has allowed 12 scores to opposing pass catchers on the season. Pierre Garçon is money in the bank in your wide receiver 2 spot. He's scored in 3 of his last 4 matchups, too, against Philly as a member of the Redskins. George Kittle failed to deliver in a good matchup in Week 7, but I'm keeping him on the radar as a C-plus tight end play against Philly, who are one of the league's most fantasy-friendly defenses to the position. It probably should come as no surprise that if they're pretty leaky in the secondary, their linebacking core also has trouble sticking with linebackers with any level of athletic ability, and George Kittle certainly has a lot of that. Again, another Iowa Hawkeye, so there's been a lot made about this Hawkeye connection between C.J. Beathard and George Kittle. Part of me buys into it. I've seen the two play together, and it was pretty good. There's an immediate chemistry there, nothing to really work out in terms of that. So George Kittle in a pretty decent spot here. Again, I'll give him just a C+. Rookie tight end scare the hell out of me. Carlos Hyde, still the clear back to own for San Fran, but tends to be game script dependent and faces the league's number 2 run defense this week, allowing less than 4 yards per carry and a league low 67 yards per game on the ground. That's all the Eagles are giving up. Hyde is a C+ because he could sneak one into the end zone if the Niners get close. I think they'll be looking to him if they get inside the 5-yard line. For the Eagles, Carson Wentz has been lights out. Absolutely fantastic. He's been your number 1 quarterback over the course of the past few weeks. Now, if you look at overall scoring in most scoring formats, Alex Smith is still number 1, but he's been trending down. Carson Wentz, his arrow is up. There's no doubt about it. He should continue the trend here. He's an A grade. Alshon Jeffrey is a B+. Nelson Aguilar, a B-, and tight end Zach Ertz is an A-. Why not an A? The Niners actually do one thing pretty well, and it's defend against opposing tight ends. They've only allowed 1 tight end score all year, so I'm scaling back my undying love for all things Zach Ertz just a bit this week. He's still an A-, still a really good, great grade, and you're still starting him, of course, but temper the expectation just a teeny tiny little bit. I mean, he's been absolutely killer this year, Zach Ertz has. And when you're where you got him in your fantasy draft, where I got him in many of my leagues, I own him in most of my leagues, turning out to be a bargain. As far as the running game, LeGarrette Blount, a C+. The Niners allow over 134 yards on the ground per game, but less than 4 yards per carry. That sort of metric doesn't bode well for a guy like Blount with his skill set. It's better for a guy like Wendell Smallwood, who is my B+ and has a dual threat nature to his game. He's a guy I will talk about more in depth a little later on in the show. That'll do it for that matchup. How about Chicago at New Orleans? Begin with the Bears. And an almost unbelievable stat from Jeff Ratcliffe at Pro Football Focus. Over the last 2 weeks, Mitchell Trubisky has completed a total of 3 passes to wide receivers. Over the past 2 weeks, 3. Needless to say, I'm not thinking about starting him, nor any of his wide receivers. I am mildly interested in tight end Zach Miller, though the Saints do a pretty good job covering the position, so Miller's a C+. The more interesting guys are the running backs. No question. Jordan Howard in particular, the Saints are giving up nearly 5 yards per carry, and though they've allowed only 4 rushing scores on the season, I see Howard as an easy A grade here. Tariq Cohen, the Swiss Army knife, he gets a B, because I think there will be plenty of touches to go around with the passing game on Telegraph Road, a la Dire Straits. I don't know if anybody got that reference. I'm a music guy, remember? It's also the 80s, so maybe not. If you got it, you're loving that right now, right? On the Saints side, Drew Brees in kind of a neutral matchup. At home, he's an A grade, as is wide receiver Michael Thomas. Again, you put this game on the road in Chicago, probably a different story for both guys. But at home, gotta love Drew Brees in this spot. Gotta love Michael Thomas in this spot. Again, it's a neutral matchup. Chicago's been pretty decent in recent years against the pass. But both guys, there's plenty to like there. Ted Ginn, a B grade as the deep threat, turning out to be one of the sneaky good free agency moves the Saints made during the offseason. Lord knows they made at least one terrible decision in free agency, right? Willie Snead sat out last week. If he does play, he's a dart throw C grade. Kobe Fleener, though, he's on your bench. The running game, Mark Ingram, the clear favorite here, averaging nearly 30 touches since the Saints dealt Adrian Peterson to the Cardinals. That's awesome. You don't get that kind of volume in many spots. Mark Ingram, I'm done with this narrative that Sean Payton hates Mark Ingram. Does Sean Payton like to win? Because in certain matchups, you should probably be feeding Mark Ingram like 30-plus touches, and he's been doing that, so good for him. This week, he sees a Bears defense allowing over 100 yards per game on the ground. Add in some receptions, and Ingram is an A grade. Alvin Kamara, not a forgotten man in fantasy circles. He's a B- C+ type play, depending on whether you're PPR or not. I say if you are PPR, he's more like B-, and he's probably more like a C+ if you're in standard formats. Los Angeles Chargers at the New England Patriots. Looking at the Chargers, Phillip Rivers is a solid start this week, despite the Patriots playing inspired football in the defensive backfield past couple of weeks. There should be enough opportunity, so he's a B+. Nobody allows more passing yards per game than New England, and they're tied for the league lead in passing scores allowed at 15. Keenan Allen is the biggest threat through the air as far as pass catchers are concerned. He's also a B+. Tyrell Williams still favored over the rookie Mike Williams, but I'm keeping him on the bench because of the resurgence of speed guy Travis Benjamin. Kind of a sneaky start here if you give it to him. He gets a C grade. Saw what he could do last week, and let's not forget, Travis Benjamin, when he explodes, he has massive games. Not saying that's going to be the case here, but at least the opportunity presents itself. Tight end Hunter Henry faces a Patriots squad that has surrendered 5 scores to the position this year. He's a solid B grade. Melvin Gordon is an A. Not too many backs getting the kind of volume he sees on a consistent basis. On volume alone, he's a great start. But I think because he can succeed both on the ground and through the air, the A is the right call for Melvin Gordon. The Patriots, let's talk about Tom Brady for a second. Because the Chargers are so terrible bad versus the run and actually pretty decent against the pass. This is a good week to temper your expectations for Tom Terrific. He starts, of course, no matter what. But this week, he's a B+. Not the obvious A you're used to. A B+ for Tom Brady, I know. Whoa, shock, horror. Brandon Cooks likely sees a lot of Casey Hayward, which is a tough matchup, so I'm giving him a B grade. Chris Hogan a B as well. He gets Trevor Williams, currently the 11th ranked cover corner by Pro Football Focus. And for what it's worth, Hayward is ranked 10th by the same publication. So you got the 10th and 11th ranked cover corners by Pro Football Focus in this game, taking on those Patriots wideouts. That might open up some lanes for Danny Amendola. He's a dart throw C grade. Rob Gronkowski, though, another solid defense like the Falcons last week that haven't yet allowed a tight end score. He's actually just a B grade this week. I wanted to give him a better grade. Thought, if those wide receivers on the outside are getting stymied, that, it's got to be, your expectations have to be tempered just a bit. But Rob Gronkowski, just a B grade this week. New England backfield, tough call. It feels like Dion Lewis is the new hot hand. At least it's been trending that way since Mike Gillislee lost a fumble a couple weeks ago. The Chargers ranked 31st in the league against the run, so someone's got to succeed here, right? They got to. Lewis gets a B+ grade for me, and I feel like I'm really stepping out on this because, I don't trust that New England backfield. I don't trust Bill Belichick. We all know how much he hates fantasy football, and I think he does that sometimes, just stockpiles a bunch of guys in any given week. I mean, this could be a Rex Burkhead week. This could be a James White week. We've seen James White succeed in PPR formats. But Dion Lewis has been carrying the ball an awful lot lately, so Lewis gets the B+. Gillislee a C+, as he's been the primary goal line guy and has a chance to score. But he's also a kind of a forgotten man, isn't he, since week 1? He scored those 3 touchdowns. We haven't heard a whole lot from Mike Gillislee. A couple opportunities here and there. Yes, there was that big fumble as well, which didn't help matters. And James White, Rex Burkhead, I don't know, just not enough of a factor to take a chance on, in my opinion. White, if you're in a PPR league, sure, you could take a look at him in your flex spot, but only in PPR leagues for him. You just never know with that wily Bill Belichick, do you? Let's do one more of this segment. Oakland at Buffalo. First, the Raiders. Quarterback Derek Carr is a B-. The Bills allow nearly 260 passing yards per game on average, but they've only surrendered 5 passing scores and have intercepted 9 enemy passes on the season. I don't have a ton of confidence in Carr, though. Remember, the figure I just threw out regarding the Bills secondary, the 260 passing yards per game, that's exactly how many yards Carr threw for against Buffalo in the last head-to-head, funny enough, to go along with 2 touchdowns. Possible, I suppose, but not likely. His pass catcher's Amari Cooper. Nice of him to finally show up last week in a big way, right when many of his owners had already benched him and didn't reap the benefits. I wonder what the percentage is on that, by the way. I do think I may have him figured out, actually, in case you're interested and will indulge me in a theory. Against man defense and press coverage, he folds like a deck of cards. Against zone, however, as he faced much of last week, fireworks. Buffalo plays a lot of zone. Therefore, I'm predicting another good game from Cooper. He's a solid B grade with upside. Michael Crabtree has scored in his only 2 meetings with the Bills. He's a B+, not starting anyone else in the passing game. Running game, I believe Jalen Richard is the back to own. I'm not starting him, though, unless there are no other options. A C grade at best. Quickly over to the Bills. Tyrod Taylor's a B grade. Raiders are bottom 3rd pass defense, susceptible to running quarterbacks. Taylor scored on the ground last year when these 2 teams met. Decent dart throw. Jordan Matthews, a C+ if he goes. Tight end Nick O'Leary, a decent bye-week fill-in option. Nothing more, nothing less. A C grade. Deontay Thompson, also a C. I just don't trust it yet. And Zay Jones, he's on the bench. LaShawn McCoy, what do you know? If you'll recall, I threw this out there last week. Why not just give the guy the ball inside the 5? Positive results could result, and they did. McCoy is an A grade this week. More matchups still to come. We're breaking down Week 8 on the 515 Fantasy Football Show. You're hearing me on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. The 515 Fantasy Football Show heard each and every Thursday on 1350 AM and 102.1 FM ESPN Radio, Des Moines, Iowa. Andy Hall taking care of your Week 8 action. Quick reminder to like us on Facebook, 515 Fantasy Football, at 515 Fantasy on Twitter, at Andy Hall Radio, in case you want to talk fantasy and or rock and roll and heavy metal. I'm all about that stuff. Connect. That is the way to do it. The promise, as always, is to give you some time back since you've invested in us, and we do appreciate it, whether it be on the radio, as I mentioned a bit ago, or digitally as well. You can always go back and listen if you missed any part of the show. We're available on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, lots of places. ESPNDesMoines.com, by the way, our home on the net. Let's get back into the Week 8 games here. Indianapolis at Cincinnati. Begin with the Colts and quarterback Jacoby Brissett. Which, the conversation has to be had at this point. You've been holding Andrew Luck, hoping that he's going to get back on the field at some point. Initially, it looked like maybe it was going to be November, which is coming right up in case you hadn't noticed. Now he's had some setbacks in practice during the week, and now he's back on the, I don't know if he's going to play this year, train. So at this point, I am advocating you drop him outright. Find yourself a decent backup if you don't already have one. My suggestion, if you had Luck, was to keep 2 quarterbacks. He would be your third, and then you could just cut one or the other loose and have 2 on your roster if need be. But if you have Andrew Luck, you're still hanging on to hope. There's just nothing there as far as I am concerned. So Jacoby Brissett's your guy going forward. I'm leaving him on the bench this week against the league's second best pass defense. The Bengals have allowed only 7 touchdowns through the air on the season, only 178 yards per game on average. Not what I'd call a great matchup. I do think T.Y. Hilton can be looked at in the flex spot. He has reached at least 100 yards receiving the last 2 times he's seen Cincy. Jack Doyle, the tight end, the only other pass catcher I care about here. Even though it's a really bad matchup on paper, his usage the past few weeks cannot be ignored. Hilton, I'd say, is a B-. Doyle, probably more in the C-plus range if you're feeling feisty. Week 7 was the first week that Marlon Mack outsnapped Frank Gore, which is noteworthy as far as the backfield goes. Mack should be let loose this week because, let's face it, Gore can't and won't be effective on the ground against these Bengals. He's never scored on them in his long and storied history. Think about it. Frank Gore has been in the league for 83 years. That means he's played the Cincinnati Bengals, at least 43 times? He's never scored on them. Leave him on your bench. Let's put a C-plus on Mack with the possibility he could surprise you here. Much more exciting breakdown for the Bengals. Andy Dalton, he's an A grade. Only one team, the Patriots, have allowed more passing yards on the season, and Dalton's been on fire since the change in offensive coordinator to Bill Lazor. This has also been a great thing for A.J. Green, also an A this week against a bad Indy secondary. Brandon LaFell is a C grade. Tyler Kroft, the tight end, one of my favorite plays of the week. He may actually still be available on your waiver wire. Shh, keep that quiet. Kroft gets a B+ against a Colts defense that has allowed 4 tight end scores. The running game should star one Joe Mixon. No team has allowed more rushing scores than Indy with 10. Mixon gets in the end zone this week. I'm sure of this. A grade. B- for Giovanni Bernard because he will get some touches. But if Marvin Lewis and the coaching staff are smart, they'll ride the hot hand here. Give Mixon the majority this week. Houston at Seattle on the Texans side. Good opportunity to cool your jets on Deshaun Watson. The Legion of Boom are alive and well, in case you haven't noticed. And only path to fantasy success, as we've seen from Watson in recent weeks, is if he can get it done with his legs as well as his arm. I think probably one more than the other suffers this week. Probably his arm suffers. The legs, he probably still will contribute some. I'll give him a B grade. The passing game will not be nearly as effective. DeAndre Hopkins is a B-. Will Fuller is a C+. Not looking at anyone else from a passing game standpoint. I do think Lamar Miller is a decent start here. The Seahawks are a top half run defense, but allow 4.7 yards per carry. Given enough volume, assuming the game is competitive, Miller should get a lot of looks, and that should translate to a decent day, a B grade for Lamar Miller. For the Seahawks, Russell Wilson sees a similarly difficult secondary, and like Watson, needs to give you something in the running game to justify starting him in a tough spot. It's a pretty stiff ceiling for Wilson. Again, like Watson, a B grade. Doug Baldwin is the go-to guy in the passing game. Give him a B grade as well. Jimmy Graham, also a B. a neutral tight end matchup here against Houston. I hate this running back committee, so I'm steering clear of everyone. But maybe Thomas Rawls as a desperation C. He's likely the guy that gets the most touches, though it was literally a 50-50 split in week 7 for the early down work with Eddie freaking Lacy last week, which is absolutely disgusting. I just don't want to touch that backfield. That offensive line has its problems. You could do better. On to Dallas at Washington. This should be a fun one. How about them Cowboys, huh? Well, Dak Prescott is a B+. Washington isn't themselves without Josh Norman, who may miss another game this week. Dak's been good against the Redskins historically, no matter where the game's at. Des Bryant is an A grade with Norman out. No wide receiver in the league has been targeted in the end zone more than he has. I think Cole Beasley is your dart throw C grade. He scored twice on Washington in the January 2017 meeting. Not bothering with Terrence Williams or Bryce Butler here. Jason Witten, though, another excellent opportunity for him this week against the league's 4th friendliest defense for tight ends. Ezekiel Elliott, of course, an easy A start for the Cowboys. Keep plugging him in until they say you can't. On the Washington side, Kirk Cousins is an A grade. The combination of a team that can't really run the ball and a defense that has allowed 11 passing scores on the season, proving to be a fantasy winner for Cousins and his passing game. This matchup, I like it a lot. Josh Doctson is a solid B grade, though I'm really hoping his target share improves. He is always a threat to score, though. And it's really funny, isn't it, to hear John Gruden try to say his last name? Did you hear that? Last week. Dotson, like the car. Doctorson. He just couldn't figure it out. Anyway, I think I like him, Josh Doctson. Jamison Crowder, not getting the volume. He's about as close to a bench grade as it gets, but it was nice to see him finally show up and do something last week, so I guess I'll give him a C if you must. Terrell Pryor, I am benching. What a disaster. And now comes the Amari Cooper game, right? I know. Tell you to mention him, he goes off. That's probably what's going to happen here. So if you feel comfortable keeping him in your starting lineup and losing this week, that's on you. Terrell Pryor has become an afterthought in this offense. And new coaching staff comes in, they want to pick their guy. They pick Josh Doctson. They did not pick Terrell Pryor. He came in free agency. It's just amazingly disappointing, though. Jordan Reed is almost all the way back. A grade this week. He caught 10 passes for 95 yards and 2 scores the last time these two teams got together. Great start for him. Running game, Chris Thompson is your start, especially in PPR leagues. Feel most comfortable with him in your flex, but he's worth a running back 2 slot, too, if you're out of options. Rob Kelly is a C grade at best. Sunday night football. Let's talk Pittsburgh at Detroit. First, the Steelers. Ben Roethlisberger on the road against a pretty good Detroit secondary featuring one of the league's best cover corners shadowing his best weapon. Not in love with this one. Big Ben is B- at best. C+ probably type of start this week. Antonio Brown gets a lot of Darius Slay, also fading him this week. He gets a B grade, and that's not often you get a B grade for Antonio Brown. Juju Smith-Schuster, worth a look at flex, a C+. Martavis Bryant, no thanks. By the way, did you see that Juju Smith-Schuster's bike got stolen? Saw this on social media, and of course somebody had to be the first one to throw out there. I bet it was Martavis Bryant. Some people should just not be allowed on social media. Looking at you, press. Anyway, no tight ends of fantasy note worth consideration for the Steelers. Le'Veon Bell, always a good start, despite facing a tough Lions front 7 who are ranked 6th in rushing yards allowed. I guess I'll give Le'Veon Bell an A-, but it probably should be an A. He's a great start. He's in your lineup. You're not thinking about this one, right? On the Lions side, Matthew Stafford's got a really tough matchup here. The Steelers are the league's stingiest pass defense, and it's not like he can rely on his running game to keep a game competitive if things aren't working out, Oh, and by the way, Golden Tate likely will not be playing. Stafford is a C grade. Not a good matchup for him. You're better off finding another option, and there are some out there. We'll talk about that shortly in the bargain bin segment. Marvin Jones is a B-. Kenny Golladay, I'll give a C grade to. We haven't seen him in action recently. He's been hurt. He's been nicked up. He's back in the lineup now. Good timing as Golden Tate is down. And I don't like either of the Lions' tight end options. No good news for the runners either. Amir Abdullah gets the lion's share of the touches, no pun intended. No better than a B- grade for Abdullah. Part of the problem with him is his touchdowns. Where are they? For all the volume he's supposedly getting, he's not getting in the end zone. That's a big problem for Amir Abdullah. Theo Riddick, another head scratcher, simply has not been used like he was last year. Desperation C, and only if you're in a full PPR league. One of the bigger disappointments for me in PPR leagues this year was taking Theo Riddick in the middle to late rounds and getting zip in terms of return from him. The writing was on the wall with that Atlanta matchup a few weeks back. I thought that would be a home run for Theo Riddick, and he'd come back and be the Theo Riddick we love and remember from last year and the year before as well. I mean, he's been a producer a couple of years running now, and this year just absolutely nothing. So don't see him getting involved in this one much. I guess desperation C for Theo Riddick is the call. One more matchup to blow through Monday night. We'll also do the bargain bins and a recap of Week 7 in the 515 Fantasy Football Listener League as well. Appreciate you tuning in to this week's edition of the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. Final segment of this week's edition of the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM and 102.1 FM ESPN Radio, Des Moines, Iowa. We're available digitally, of course, as well. You can get us any number of ways in that manner. If you have an iPhone, try Apple Podcasts, iTunes, whatever you call it. We're there. If you're an Android type of person, you can try us on Stitcher and a number of other places. ESPNDesMoines.com if you ever want to check out our radio home on the web. We post the shows there each and every Thursday afternoon. Got a few more segments left of this edition of the show. Real quick, want to again invite you to like us on Facebook, 515 Fantasy Football. We're on Twitter at 515 Fantasy if you're looking for fantasy help of any kind. I'm at Andy Hall Radio. I also accept fantasy there, and we talk rock and metal and all kinds of fun musical things on my Twitter page as well. So, before we get to the bargain bid segment, the recap of the Listener League, got all that fun stuff before the end of the show here. But first, a Monday night matchup, Denver at Kansas City. Begin with the Broncos. Quarterback Trevor Siemian, a big regression from how he started the season. And now that Emmanuel Sanders is out of the picture for the time being, things are even worse. Unfortunate, too, because the Chiefs have been pretty bad against the pass. They rank 29th in yards allowed via the air. They've given up 13 passing scores. If he does get one, the likely recipient, I guess, would be Demaryius Thomas, right? I mean, he did haul in one last week for what, 80 yards? Got called back on what I thought was a crap penalty, but anyway. He hasn't scored on Kansas City since 2014, Demaryius Thomas. So not as easy as you think here. Siemian, a C grade at best. Thomas, I'll give a B- to. Benny Fowler, halfway decent dart throw. I'll give him a C grade. He caught a long one when these teams met last season, so that is of note. Been a rough couple of weeks for the Broncos in general, but especially C.J. Anderson. It is baffling to me that he's not getting more opportunities. More baffling that Devontae freaking Booker has been mixing in as much as he has. I guess it could be the offensive line, which, come to think of it, is an epidemic, league-wide bad offensive line play. It's happening all over the place. Anderson has a great matchup this week, but to be honest, I can only muster a B grade for him, and that's with a heap and helping of hope. Triple H. Neither Jamal Charles nor Booker are worth looking at least I don't think so in this matchup. Finally, get over to the Chiefs side here. Fantasy's number one overall scorer is still Alex Smith. He's a B grade this week against Denver's elite secondary. Think about Smith. Even if he doesn't light the world on fire with his passing game, he's sneaky good as a scrambler. That's something a lot of people don't give him a lot of credit for, but he'll give you some rushing yards. Either way, I think he's worth a start despite the ridiculously tough matchup here. Tyreek Hill also should be considered despite a date with Aqib Talib. Both guys are in the B range. Travis Kelce going to continue to get it done. Why wouldn't he? The Broncos aren't nearly as tough against tight ends as they are everyone else. Kelce's a B+. Kareem Hunt has the toughest task of all of them. Denver is the NFL's top-ranked run defense. But due to sheer volume, he is still starting for you, but only a B-. Got to temper your expectations. And that does it for all the Week 8 breakdowns. Best of luck to you. Again, if you need any help, feel free to reach out. Always happy to have the conversation. Bargain Bin segment is sponsored by our friends at Twisted Vine Brewing Company on Westtown Parkway, West Des Moines, online at twistedvinebrewery.com. 30 beers on tap, 25 of which brewed on site. And they've got wine as well. They've got food, pizza, popcorn, and NFL Red Zone each and every Sunday, starting at 10:30. Definitely a place to go check out there near Valley West Mall. Twisted Vine Brewing Company on Westtown Parkway. All right, been killing it all year long. Time to continue the trend, right? Week 8, my bargain bins are at the quarterback position, Case Keenum, Minnesota Vikings. You may recall, I made a case for Keenum in 2016 as the starting quarterback for the Los Angeles Rams and thought it was a pretty strong case for a roster spot on your fantasy squad. As it turned out, that was a swing and a miss. But these things do happen from time to time. But not in this feature. Not this year. In 6 games this season, Keenum completing over 64% of his passes. He has thrown for 5 touchdowns, including a 369-yard, 3-touchdown performance against the Bucs in Week 3. Has also chipped in some rushing yards. The Browns, clearly in suck mode until further notice, have allowed multiple touchdown passes in all but 2 of their games, and even let Joe Flacco throw a couple. Keenum is a good spot start, even if Stephon Diggs sits for another week, but is a great start if Diggs is in. All right, so just keep an eye on that. And by the way, Keenum owned in less than 10% of Yahoo Fantasy Leagues. He should be there for you in case you need him. At the running back position, Wendell Smallwood, Philadelphia Eagles. In addition to being downright awful against the run again this season, the Niners have allowed the NFL's most running back receptions and touchdowns to the position through the air. Oh, sure, LeGarrette Blount gets the ball some, especially down deep. But Smallwood will get his touches, both running and catching. And shockingly, he's owned by less than half of Yahoo Fantasy Leagues. An excellent flex play regardless of scoring format if you're in need of a guy. I'm even okay with him as a running back 2 in PPR leagues this week. That's how much I like Wendell Smallwood in this matchup. My pass catcher this week is Josh Doxson, Washington Redskins, the Cowboys. Maybe a top 12 unit in terms of yards allowed through the air, but they've allowed a total of 11 scores to opposing receivers as well. Doxson, an emerging talent that not everyone has caught on to yet in the fantasy world. Chances are he's still available on your waiver wire. If he is and you need a receiver, grab him without delay. Do it right now. Pause this program if you're listening digitally. Go do it now. Take care of it. Break the bank for him. He will score touchdowns in an offense that likes to throw the ball, partially because they can't run it. That's a good formula for a wide receiver. Typically, the series between Washington and Dallas has been pretty high scoring. It's a good bet Doxson has a shot at a touchdown, maybe more this week. The 515 Fantasy Football Listener League, presented by Iowa Firecracken. Iowa-owned, Iowa-operated, America-approved. Find them online at firecracken.com. They're on Facebook. You can like them there. They're on Twitter at iFirecracken, and very good about responding, by the way, like we are. Taking a page from our book. Nice job, Maddie. Come December 1st, fireworks back on sale here in the state of Iowa. It's a great time to stock up, to see what they've got there. An extensive selection, competitive pricing. Their location there in Windsor Heights. If you're in the market for beautiful things that go boom when December 1 comes around, we hope you'll buy from 3 local guys that love beautiful things that go boom, certainly, but they're also fantasy football fans like we are. A recap of Week 7 of the Listener League. My squad, second highest scoring team in the league, by the way, went to 3-4 with a big Monday night win over Phillips Bullowtie, 90.02 to 79.04. Thank you very much to Kirk Cousins and crew. Brian's team got squashed by Big Willie, 88.52 to 82.80. Booming in a big spot, blasts Taco Corp, 95.86 to 77.16. Man, Maddie, where are you coming from, my friend? I guess as the Cowboys go, so does Maddie's fantasy team. Bad luck continues for Steve's Annihilators, who fall to Petty and the Jets, 110.62 to 51.38. Purple People Eaters still unbeaten, serving up the beat down on the artist formerly known as Comb the Desert, 113.76 to 87.52. And the high score of the week goes to Moo Cow Guy, proving once again that a big fat juicy steak beats your baby back ribs, your Iowa chops, your Georgia pulled pork, your burnt ends. Steak over oink. 128.66 to 76.88. This week, my squad looks to keep Steve's super losing streak alive. Don't let me down, pal. Taco time, always a good time unless you're Brian's team. Speaking of losing streaks. Purple People Eaters need to taste bitter defeat. Will Petty and the Jets be up to the challenge? We can only hope. Artist formerly known as Comb the Desert up against Phillips Bullowtie, who would be in dead last if it weren't for our lovable loser, Oink, who gets the M80 treatment right in the keister this week. Boom. And finally, Free Willy trying not to get harpooned by Moo Cow. Both coming off big Week 7 wins. Best of luck to each and every one of you. except for Steve. You suck. That's going to about do it for this week's edition. Thank you for listening. The condensed edition going forward, of course, due to a lot of things, a lot of unfortunate things, but we're going to press on. I love fantasy football. You know this about me, you guys. So I'm going to keep this train rolling as long as I possibly can. And if you need any help, don't hesitate to reach out. Again, we're on Facebook, 515 Fantasy Football, on Twitter, at 515 Fantasy. I'm at Andy Hall Radio in case you want to reach out and talk about things other than fantasy. Totally cool with that. And in case you missed any part of the show, you can always go back and listen to us digitally anytime. iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher. I think somebody said we're on Mixcloud or something. I'm not up on all the different means in which you can download and listen to this show at your leisure, but it's good to know that they're out there. And they are, and you are out there in more ways than one. Thanks again for listening. Until next week, I'm Andy Hall. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio.